Thank you, and thanks for being here. How many of you saw the Super Bowl? Not very many? How many motorcycle safety messages did you see during the Super Bowl? Was there any traffic safety messages during the Super Bowl? I think I saw one. Right. Well, like Patty said, my name is John Young, and I'm in charge of the motorcycle safety unit at DPS. The Texas Department of Public Safety has been involved in motorcycle training since 1983, when the then Governor Mark White was upset with DPS, so he charged DPS with the task of motorcycle safety. No, just kidding. It was one of those things that was unfunded, so we automatically got it. Like a lot of things DPS get. So I'll give you a little bit of history of the program. We're in charge of motorcycle and ATV safety training. A lot of people call our office with driver's license issues or issues about law enforcement or enforcement with motorcycles out in the public, and that's not what we do. Although we're with the DPS, we were not involved in those areas until recently. One thing I would like to say here while we're getting my short PowerPoint ready to go is that if it weren't for some people in this room, there would be no meeting today. There would be no website called Look, Learn, Live. There would be no new mobile training vehicles that we enjoy to use across the state. We would not have new pamphlets. We would not have this brochure and this banner over here. We would not have this over here. We would not be here today if it wasn't for a person who is a single parent, a research scientist, and working on a PhD. Patty Turner. What's interesting about that is, as I understand it, if you are a research scientist in traffic safety, there are lots of lucrative grants and worthy endeavors to work on. She chooses motorcycle. And I want to applaud you again for that. She chooses motorcycle. Okay, so the Department of Public Safety, we are charged with the task of making available throughout the state motorcycle training for beginner riders and offering an experience course. We're funded through the legislative process for that, and this last year, we're talking calendar year, was the biggest training year that since we were created. The numbers are 45,000 students. So as you can see, I don't do much training. Our contracted sponsors and our mobile unit does all the training, all the student training. What we do in DPS mainly is we train instructors and we certify them through the Motorcycle Safety Foundation's curriculum. And we contract with them. We allow them to go into private business, and then we state contract with those providers. So it's a licensed, basically contracted private business. So the program trained 45,737 students. And as you can see, since 1983, that's a big number. We opened up 21 new training locations. We have a total of 196. That also includes military installations. We trained 22 new rider coaches. We have a total of 445 rider coaches in Texas. That's more than any other state. We're the biggest program in the world if you want to talk square miles. A little bit about our training numbers over time. As you can see, we had a huge spike, and that was in 08. And now we have gone way beyond that. Why? Does anyone remember? I know our training providers know why we had that huge spike of persons wanting trained in 08. No, that was a year before mandatory. What happened to gas prices? I'm sorry? Right. But what was the difference between that and now? Economy was good. High gas, hey, it was real easy to talk the wife into that motorcycle, right? What happened later on is now we have a downturn of the economy and we have high gas prices. So there's been a decrease in motorcycle sales, not only in Texas, but nationwide. It went down like 30 some odd percent. The Texas Dealers Association, if you've never been to one of their meetings, you should go because they have all of that consumer statistics. It's very interesting to know. So we had a really good training season. Now we'll talk about funding. Funding, we lost money this legislative session, about $400,000 for the biennium. That money was the money that we had to buy and replace training motorcycles. It is gone. So we had that decrease from $930,000 down to $741,000. What we do with the money? Well, we have the staff salaries and benefits. The new training motorcycles is no longer available because that was the funding that was cut. We have contract services, reimbursements. We don't have a conference. We'll get into why in a few minutes. We have a lot of promotional items. We have completion cards. You can read it. There's a lot of things there. It's a big endeavor. It's a big business. So with less funding, we have to do less. The problem with that is we have the numbers of motorcyclists growing. The population is growing. Car drivers are growing. Who knows at what rate Texas grows each year? I heard the number earlier. How many thousands per year? Increase. So let's talk about training. Okay, so we need to train more people. Just by the way, Ken talked about this earlier, and I just love it when this is brought up. We have a huge federal study going on right now that, remember, is coming out of your pocket to find out if we need training or not. I know you didn't do it, Ken, but it's interesting because the research contacted Texas and said, hey, we want to do some of this study there because we understand DPS has a new facility. It's a very closed environment. We have traffic lights. We can do all these things on traffic streets. What they propose to do is take riders with no training and put them on a motorcycle. Now, I'm talking a person who claims they can ride one, and have them in these scenarios and base their skill level and their evaluation versus someone trained to see if there's any difference at all. It's been suggested by several universities that there's no difference, and that's what they're trying to find out. I don't want to be a part of that project. I just chose not to. I don't want to take trained people and untrained people and compare the two. I think training works, or it wouldn't have been around for ever since the motorcycle's been around. Yes, sir.
But it's legislative mandatory. Now you have to take the course to get a license.
Right.
And they're not funding it as much.
Right.
That makes a lot of sense.
I'm glad you well, thank you. I'm glad you brought that up. So I'll get back on task, and we'll go to some questions. Yes, sir.
Did they ever ask the students if it works?
Did they ever ask students what?
If it works, if the training works?
I don't think so. I don't think so, but bottom line is they're testing to see if training, I think more over the effectiveness of training. We know we have to have training. I think they're trying to test the effectiveness of it. So the challenges we have at DPS in the Motorcycle Safety Education Unit is the budget cuts and its effect on quality assurance. Before these cuts, we typically would contract with chief trainers that would go out and conduct quality assurance at all the contracted training sites. With those budget cuts, it's hard to get out there. And since mandatory training did go into effect, we had perhaps some folks that were taking some shortcuts. Training started at some locations going downhill and became very quick. What's supposed to be a 16-hour core curriculum, we watched taught in about 6 hours one day, and they walked away with their certificate of completion. Of course, we immediately shut that place down, but that's just one. You know, how many training sites do we have out there? 196. Most of those folks do a bang-up, outstanding job. But there's a few that we have to check on, and we're spending your tax dollars, so you want us to make sure that we're getting quality out there. The training motorcycle budget is probably going to be the largest impact that we're going to have out of this biennium, because we don't have money to buy new motorcycles to replace worn motorcycles that are getting old. And we simply have to have the best equipment for these students, for our public. The reason the unit is here in the first place is because years ago someone decided, look, we need to take some of the motorcyclist money and we need to train motorcyclists by motorcyclists. So $5 from your driver's license when you renew. By the way, we have just over 1 million licensed motorcyclists in Texas. $5, you have a 6-year renewal. You can do the math. Plus your 75 cents for every registered motorcycle goes into a fund that was dedicated to this endeavor. We haven't seen that fund in a while, but we'll get to that again in a moment. Retaining staff at DPS and for our training providers out there is becoming an issue. If you work for the state, you know that we get raises like every other month, right? I've been with DPS now 4.5 years and have not even had a cost of living raise. But you try to hire somebody in, and we have high demand, very low pay, and because we're DPS and we administer the program, then that person is not able to go teach and make part-time money because it's a conflict of interest. So we have a very hard time maintaining staff at the DPS because of the pay. It's hard to get by, especially whenever you can't go out and make a little extra money on the weekend. The 83rd legislation, what we need there, we have a need for 3-wheel training. We also have the need to separate and have a separate license, a 3-wheel license. Right now, we're just getting by with the seat of our pants, and here's why. In Senate Bill 1967 was passed mandatory training. Everyone has to go attend and successfully complete a BRC. Well, a BRC is a definition of a course. It's on 2 wheels. What about those folks that choose to ride 3 wheels? Maybe for whatever reason can't ride 2. We eliminated them from becoming licensed. So we had to do a little scrambling in my office and come up with some ways to view other training as equivalent. Now, I don't like it. It's not the best way to do it, but it's all we've got based on the law. We need to get those things cleaned up. The administrative language change related to suspensions of program providers, we need to clean up that language. It hasn't been looked at or maintained since 1983. And there's been a lot of differences. There's a lot of things that need to be cleaned up. Enhancement projects that we've done recently, electronic student reporting. Prior to this system going into effect, we just had old, antiquated database systems. We did have real numbers, good numbers in real time. So if you ask me, John, how many students did y'all train, 6 months ago? Through the first 6 months of the year or in the second quarter, I could have only kind of guesstimated it. It would have been actually 2 years before we'd had real numbers. So we just launched that project in January. We're getting some good positive feedback. I've even had really good positive feedback from a couple people here today. I think it's going to be a really good reporting device to give us some good numbers about training. The other flip side of that is, as Terry talked about, we've had an increase in fatalities. We want to take those fatalities, we want to check them against the students who have gone to training and see if we have some kind of number correlation between training and fatalities. That's going to be a little bit skewed because you can still have a lot of folks out there that got their license the old way, because remember, mandatory training started in '09. Prior to that, you could simply Well, probably like all of us, a lot of us in this room did. Never even heard of training. Didn't have time for it anyway. I mean, I got mine the old way. I rode my motorcycle up to the DPS office. I wasn't licensed. I was a police officer though, and I wore my uniform so I could get away with it. I got there, and I took the riding test and the written test and passed. So there's so some of those fatalities may not have attended training even though they were licensed. The other thing about the increase in fatalities, every time we release the number, TxDOT releases that number, I'll get lots of calls in the office. What's happening? The numbers went up. Yes, the numbers did go up. We do have more fatalities. But also we have how many people that come in, the state grows by how many people a day? A year? So, I can only think that if we have more people, plus motorcycles, we issued 45,000 new licenses in 1 year. Now the number's bigger, but if we would take those numbers and crunch them with statistics, did we have an increase based on the traveling population? And I'm an old farm boy, so I have to put everything in an analogy. And I'm from West Texas too. That's even worse. It's like this. If I'm standing in my barn and there's 10 bees, I may get stung. If next year, if I'm standing in the barn and there's 100 bees, I'm probably going to get stung. It's the same way out there in traffic. You have to look at it the same way. As the percentages go up, the chances of mishap and fatality is there. There's no way around it. One other thing I would like to bring to the attention is ATV. Now, I know that ATV is not a motorcycle. It's closely related. And I would just like to say that part of our programs involve ATVs as well. We've had a surge of ATV crashes, fatalities, ages 12 through 18 in the last couple of years. 1,443 hospital visits that we know of, and that's only from ERs that are electronically capable of recording the data that we needed for that. We have a problem with ATVs, and that falls under our jurisdiction as well. And if any of you are involved in that safety training or interested in becoming an instructor or interested in ATV in any way, we have got to start addressing that problem too. It's usually not brought up in a place like this because it's not highway safety. So, some of that stuff kind of gets put on the back burner because you have to go through other grant sources and other research sources to address those things. Also, I would like to talk a little bit about some other programs we started. Yes, sir.
What percentage of those ATV crashes occur on public roads?
I don't think anywhere on public roads. Most of them are categorized as a farm equipment accident. So, it's what we're seeing when you read the reports is that maybe you own land or someone owns land. Obviously, on farms, there's a lot of ATVs, ranches, and that sort of thing. Youngsters are getting on these things, and maybe they're a good rider. Maybe they have all their protective gear on. But the problem is the weight to gravity ratio that ejects a small person from the vehicle. So, there's those issues. Mainly one of the contributing factors that they claim is the child is too small or they're on an ATV they're not rated for. In other words, you have the different age categories. Like you may have an ATV and you look at it, it has a warning sticker, no one under 16 on this particular is recommended on this particular machine, and that sort of thing. We've actually narrowed down 3 East Texas counties of being very high in the proportion rate of those fatalities. And it's primarily wooded areas with high agriculture. I can tell you one is Panola and Shelby. It's those eastern counties. And I don't know what the other one. The report was just released last week. Also, Butterfly, I'll get to your question in just a second, because if I get off track, we'll go so many different directions that we'll be here a while. The other thing I'd like to tell you about, you probably haven't ever seen a Texas Highway Patrol in your lifetime on motorcycles patrolling. Recently, we were able to secure 2 Harley Davidsons with the help of Harley Davidson Motor Company, fully rigged out. I was able to talk the director into letting us pilot a program in the Texas Highway Patrol. We took 3 troopers and we trained them with Northwestern's curriculum for motor officer training. We hosted that training at our new DPS location in Florence. We had, I think, 17, 18 officer candidates that went through that training. I think 16 passed. It's very hard if you've never seen that kind of training. At any rate, we had 3 troopers. We assigned those 3 troopers and those motorcycles to the Capital District, that's Region 7. And they actually had to call them in and tell them slow down. They were writing way too many tickets and showing all the guys up in the car. Their stats went out the roof. Well, here's the problem with it. There's a few people at the department that don't support motorcycles and DPS. We had them up until 1956, whenever the car became a much better police tool to use. We had a pilot program in 78 and 79 that they decided to get away from because of the motorcycle itself. It was the old KZ-1000 that had the high-speed wobble issue with the run-flat tire. We don't need to go into that. But at any rate, our new director is forward-thinking enough and open-minded to do things, and he allowed this to occur. The problem is, if you like that idea, we need the public to start letting your representative know how cool it was to see a trooper on a motorcycle at your state capitol, or it's just going to kind of drift away. I think it's a good way to bridge the gap between law enforcement and the motorcycling public. And the troopers I talk to probably every other week or so, and you can't really tell your department administrator how great it's working when there's no way to measure how many people stop and take a picture of the troopers and their motorcycle and engage them in conversation. So it's a public awareness tool that I think would be great. Also, we can take them to some events. We should have brought them here. I was a little late on the request. But we could take those troopers around to some state events and that sort of thing. If you think that's a good idea, please let your representative know, or the director of the Department of Public Safety. They have received lots of letters at the Capitol after seeing and talking to the troopers there. So I think it's a great idea. I would like to see the program expand into the regions and have 2 units per region in the next 2 years. The troopers would not be riding the motorcycles all the time. They could patrol on them 4 hours a day and go get in the car for other 4. But I tell you what, you talk about visibility and being seen. You stick a trooper on a motorcycle, and we almost had a pileup on I-35 because they were going, what? DPS on motorcycles. So they were seen. Okay, I'll take your questions now. Butterfly, I could have guessed you would have a question. No, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
Well, actually, there are 2 different subjects here. All right, one was about the ATVs that the children are at risk on. Isn't there a way to, I don't have an ATV, so I don't really understand if it would work or not, but isn't there a way to make in the race cars, they have the shoulder, not a seat, a harness and maybe a roll bar. Wouldn't that work with an ATV to protect the child?
I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, the problem is we're trying to find out what the problem is. So I don't know where we need to go with that, but we have got to start addressing that problem.
The other thing is about the data that you're going to put together on the effectiveness of the safety courses. I'm just wondering if you have a database where all the names of the people who have passed the course, and if you have a database of all the accident victims' names, if if you ran them against each other, wouldn't that tell you how many of the riders have taken the course and haven't it?
Yeah, that's the information we're going to start gathering. Right. We're going to see, okay, did this fatality, had they received training, when? It's a quite lengthy process because they may have received training in another state. So we're going to check our database and see if they're trained there, but we can also check some other databases like MSF's database, especially if they were in military. You know, they would be in the MSF database. Yes. Oh, right. He was right before.
For ATV owners that buy a new vehicle,
There is an incentive for all new ATV purchases to go through training for free. That's basically through the manufacturers.
similar to what we have now, like Harley Davidson or BMW, they refund the course for BRC.
Right. Actually, you get a voucher, and you have like a couple of years where you can go through training, and not only you, everyone in your household can go through that training. Right.
And just a comment, you gave numbers on how much, Terry gave numbers on how many people were killed and injured in accidents, and also how many bikes are registered. And then you commented on how little funding is getting. And I just want everybody to be aware that the funding supposedly was supposed to come from the registration and the license renewals. We still got, basically the state still got the same amount of money. They were only down 1% on the number of registrations. And the number of licenses didn't change either, probably went up. So they still got $5.75 for all those people. They just chose not to give it them this year. They're using it once again. So we basically, most likely, got these money.
Actually, that's incorrect. The money is still there. There's just over $12 million in the fund, and the way that the language is written, it would lead one to believe we're the only people that can access the money. However, it gets a little gray about how to access it. Some of it is due to the language. Now, last year or last legislation, we had Senate Bill 1967 passed. In that, it directed us to be funded with its funding source. The only problem is, now that we've tracked the money down, we know exactly where it's at. We know exactly the language. We know exactly the go-to people. Now they're saying that we have to put in a legislative budget board request, like any capital item. So we're already too late to have gotten it this year. We have to make that request now to get it for the next biennium. But make no mistake, it still has to go through the appropriations. They're not going to hand anybody the full amount. The best we can hope for is that they add the $400,000 back in, and they give us that amount to fund us back over $1 million like we were before. That's the best case scenario we can hope for. The reason for the funding, and I know this has been an issue for years and years and years because no one could really get their head wrapped around it. Let me go over it real quick. We were funded that way, and in the 78th legislative session, they changed it. They said, we don't want you to fund DPS, Motorcycle Safety Bureau, with dedicated funds anymore. What we'd like you to do is take those dedicated funds away, but give us the same amount. So what happened is, if they had dedicated funds come into the Motorcycle Safety Bureau, that's the only thing it could be used for. If they undedicated those funds, they took the Bureau and changed it into a unit. Now they did not have dedicated funds, and they could play with that money as they saw fit. And that's exactly what happened.
And all under the guise of saying they signed the car, they kind of did, we have less money. So they have the same amount of money.
No.
We gave them the same amount.
The money is still collected. It's still there, and we're going to get it. We're going to get funded by it. We're going to get this motorcycle money back. We're going to get more back because look at our growing population. Look how many more training sites we need. We need motorcycles. We need technology. We're already 8 years behind the curve on technology. We have got to get ahead of the curve on motorcycle training and education. Suds?
Yes, I have a comptroller's report right here in front of me, fiscal year 2011, which dates from September 1st, 2010 to March 31st. And that year there were $681,632 collected off licensing fees for that purpose. It's GR 0501, dedicated. Now they say that there's no such thing as a dedicated fund anymore. It's all general revenue, but I've been talking to Representative Jim Pitts, the Appropriation Head Committee Chairman, and he says it is a dedicated fund. It's just listed as general revenue. And they had a hard time digging this fund up, doing the research, and the reason was because there was no expenditure. Okay, to the date I've got a report here, now you got more updated info than I do. I haven't seen the comptroller report for this last year. But to that report was $11,447,333.28 in that fund. Now, the breakdown that I found seems to be your CFO. You're saying it has to be gone through legislature, or he has to file a request. Are you saying he has done this? He has not done this. What's it going to take to get him to do this?
I have to file the request.
You have to file a request.
That's information that we just learned. See, we thought that with Senate Bill 1967, it was my understanding that that was a directive to them to fund us this way, and it passed.
That was the intention.
Yeah. The unintended consequence is it's back on me. I have to file the LBB before the next legislative session.
Okay. So you won't be able to do that until the 2013 legislative session.
Right.
Anyway, we can get copies of that. And one other thing I learned through Jim Pitts' office, I haven't seen this on the comptroller report. Like I said, I'm still waiting on it to come out in April. But I understand the DMV was also added as an administrator on there. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, they were added as an administrator because they're one of the contributors. Because the titles, right, it's been transferred over to, they've changed the name from Vehicle Titles and Registration to the DMV. So they changed that language there.
Okay, does DMV, is it its own entity, or is it a branch of TxDOT or a branch of DMV?
It's its own entity.
Its own entity. Do they plan on using that fund, anything out of that fund for anything? Do you know anything about that? There's no DMV in here, right? I got a lot of questions.
I'll tell you, we had a sit-down talk about this fund, and the fund says it may only be used, let me get the wording right here, it may only be used to defray the cost of administering the motorcycle operator training program. There's some issues with that language. It may only be used.
I was really kind of hoping that, I guess it was a couple of years back, I was told that there would start, maybe from these funds, be a training course for officers on better assessing motorcycle vehicle accidents, where they could better assess what really happened.
Well, the good thing is we don't have to use that fund because all that's been funded by a grant from TxDOT.
Right, so that is actually a program that is working out.
Yes, as a matter of fact, we're about to receive the pilot program, and in the next couple of months, we're going to run the first pilot program. Now, that's the Texas version. Ken mentioned before that there was a national version, and there was, and we actually taught that at DPS, and it worked out fairly well. We certainly found some things that we wanted to do different for Texas, but remember what NHTSA funded for the national was kind of a template for all the states to use. So it's kind of watered down generic because, if you've been around the lower 48, we do it 48 different ways. So it was fairly broad. Now we've been funded right here in our own state to do our own, and we just almost have that completed. And it's going to be a really good course for our Texas peace officers here because we're going to have everything Texas about it. It's going to be Texas roadway users. It's going to be typical Texas accidents. It's going to be what your troopers might pull up onto a rural road with no other vehicles. What kind of markings that differs from your regular basic training police academy that you receive out there, because the whole reason for this grant and this training is the dynamics of motorcycles are different. And you just can't teach everything you need to teach in a police academy in 618 hours or whatever the academy's up to today.
There's just so many things that depend on their accurate assessment of what went on. I mean, everything depends on that one report that they turn in, so it's very important.
A lot depends on that, and I think that we're also going to try desperately to get prosecution. Again, the Texas Municipal Courts Association, we're going to get the Association of Counties. We're going to try to have a portion of that perhaps should go to judges and prosecutors. Because, you know, we can investigate a fatality and we can find fault in another party, but if they're not filed on and pursued and prosecuted, what good is it? Why do we waste our time? Oh, it's just another motorcyclist. That's the attitude in some places. Let's move on. Let's get on a happy note. Motorcycling. We do it because it's dangerous. If it's not dangerous, I don't want to do it. I fly a plane because it's dangerous.
I just wanted to make sure I understood the verbiage that you were speaking of. So the money that comes out of the license fee is supposed to go to support motorcycle awareness, but the verbiage is it can only go to...
It says nothing about awareness.
I mean, motorcycle safety.
Yeah.
Training. But then the money can only be spent to defray those costs. Is that what you said?
To defray the cost of administering the Texas Motorcycle Operator Training Program. That's been the issue, right? So last year at the forum, the question was brought up to Terry, if all this money's there, then why can't you use some of it to broaden the awareness campaigns and get more spots on TV and get more commercials and get more billboards and have a plane flying around with a banner and all this great stuff? Well, the fact of the matter is it can't be used for awareness, only to defray the cost of administering the operator training program. Remember, that was set up in 1982 and 3. Things need overhauled. We're not in 83. We need to change some things. Perhaps we need to talk to our representative and our legislators, and we need to get them to look and say, hey, we need to maybe perhaps push this over in awareness, some of it. We need to get cutting edge technology and on top of the game with our training. You know, we've just been maintaining training. We're not cutting edge. We're doing the same old thing, the same old way that we have for years. And like Ken said, some of it ain't working. If ain't a word, I'm sorry.
We're in Texas. It's okay.
Would you be, based on you saying that, would you be willing to work with us to try to introduce some legislation to make some of that money available for other things than what it was intended in 1982?
I would love to. Here's the thing. I'm sitting in a spot to where I see all this stuff, but also I value my job. I have to be very careful about directing your efforts. I can tell you that you need to go get your money and use your money where you need to use your money. The rest has to come from you, the taxpayers that paid the money. I'm included in that. I don't have a motorcycle, but I have a motorcycle license. Harleys don't hold up to heat very well.
You need to go away, John.
You think that would have held up better? I lost my motorcycle in the Bastrop fire. I don't think any motorcycle would have held up to that. Yes, sir.
Based on the numbers trained last year at $5 a piece, that's $2,189,490 for 1 year.
You know what's neat about that? You know, if you do the numbers historically, that's exactly what about we need to operate a really good program. Exactly, almost to the penny. Yes, sir.
Do we know for a fact now that this paper, or that this money truly exists other than on paper?
Yes, it's there.
Yeah, they let me count it. We melted it down into gold bars.
There were some real
parameters for a while that some of it had possibly gotten pulled to the general fund. I wanted to know.
No, it has, it's there, it's well and live, and there are no, at least that I know of, plans to do anything with it because it would take a law change. Now, I know you think like I do, it doesn't take a law change to do anything because things get done. But no, there's enough eyes looking at this money now that we found it that I think they're going to have to, I don't think it was any one person's fault that this money isn't utilized. I know we like to find the smoking gun and the one person responsible, but I think when you set something like this up and you have different people being elected and dropping out of government and change, you know, a lot of changes take place in state government, that I don't think it was anybody's fault that this is there and it hadn't been used and the processes change, and pretty soon we look up one day and say, where's our money, where's that money, where's that money? They actually have to look at it and say, oh, well, it's right here, it's alive and well. Well, why haven't we ever used it? Well, no one's ever made a request for it. Well, how do you make a request? So we have to get on today's processes to get yesterday's money. Yes, sir.
So basically, John was just saying is, and I agree with this, we tend to want to fix the blame on somebody instead of trying to fix the problem.
Right.
What we need to do is get together and fix the problem rather than, you know, point fingers at people.
Right. So let's do the math again. We need to operate this program with new motorcycles every year, and we need, you know, we can really resource our training sites again so they can offer bigger and better training and have better facilities. We need about what's brought in every year.
What was that number again?
$2,189,490.
2 million what?
$2,189,490.
Okay, so that's what we need to run a really good program on the operator side. There's still $12.5 million in there. Perhaps you want to use that somewhere else. It's your money. So this coalition and these meetings that you all have, it's your money. You need to go make it happen. I can't go up there trying to push my weight around because I don't mean anything to legislators or representatives because I'm a state employee. Even though I'm a voter, they don't seem to care. So, but you are the people. It is your money. That's all I can say about that. What else?
Things could change again. This is an election year.
Thank goodness. Oh, wait, that was John Young talking, not a representative of the Department of Public Safety.
It's a big broom in motion.
Thank you all very much.